The legend of King Arthur is one of the most enduring and captivating tales in the history of Western mythology. Rooted in the ancient folklore of Britain, the story of Arthur has been passed down through generations, taking on new layers of meaning and myth as the centuries have rolled by. It is a story filled with bravery, loyalty, love, and betrayal. A story that speaks to the timeless ideals of chivalry and the dream of a just and noble kingdom. At the heart of this legend is King Arthur himself, a man born not into privilege, but into mystery. His origins are shrouded in secrecy and fate. The tale begins long before Arthur would pull the famous sword from the stone, before he would ascend to the throne of Britain, and before he would gather the greatest knights of the realm to sit at the Round Table. Arthur's story is one of destiny. It is said that Arthur was the son of Uther Pendragon, a powerful king of Britain, and Igraine, the Duchess of Cornwall. But Arthur's birth was far from ordinary. It was brought about by the magical intervention of the great wizard Merlin. Merlin, wise and far-seeing, understood that Arthur was destined to become the greatest king Britain had ever known. But he also knew that Arthur's path to the throne would be fraught with danger. To protect the boy, Merlin took Arthur away as a child and placed him under the care of Sir Ector, a noble knight who raised Arthur as his own son, never revealing the boy's true lineage. Arthur grew up unaware of his royal blood, believing himself to be a simple squire, living a life far removed from the intrigues of the court. But his destiny could not be hidden forever. The kingdom of Britain during this time was in turmoil. Without a true heir to the throne, rival lords and knights fought for power, and the land was fractured by war and uncertainty. In a bid to restore peace and order, Merlin devised a test, one that would reveal the rightful king of Britain. A great sword, Excalibur, was magically embedded in a stone, and the prophecy declared that only the true king could pull it free. As knights and nobles from across the land attempted to draw the sword and failed, the humble Arthur, still unaware of his true identity, was thrust into the challenge by fate. In a moment that would change his life forever, Arthur pulled the sword from the stone with ease, fulfilling the prophecy and revealing himself as the one true king. But the journey of King Arthur was only just beginning. With Excalibur in hand, Arthur ascended to the throne, but the task before him was monumental. Britain was still divided, and the young king needed to unite his people under the ideals of justice, peace, and honor. To help him in this quest, he gathered around him the greatest knights of the realm, each one sworn to uphold the code of chivalry. These knights became known as the Knights of the Round Table, a symbol of equality and unity, where no one knight sat higher than another. At the center of this court stood Camelot, Arthur's legendary castle. Camelot became a beacon of hope, a place where the ideals of Arthur's reign could flourish. It was not just a physical fortress, but a symbol of the dream Arthur sought to bring to life. A kingdom where truth and justice prevailed, and where the strong protected the weak. Under Arthur's rule, Camelot became the heart of Britain, a place where the stories of brave knights, magical quests, and timeless love unfolded. Yet, like all great legends, Arthur's tale is not without its shadows. For every moment of triumph, there was a moment of tragedy. At the heart of Arthur's story lies not only the glory of his reign, but also the seeds of his downfall. His most trusted knight, Lancelot, would betray him not with malice, but out of love for Queen Guinevere. His own son, Mordred, would rise against him, shattering the peace he had worked so hard to build. And his final battle would see him brought low, not by a foe from without, but by the betrayals and conflicts that tore his kingdom apart from within. As we journey through the tale of King Arthur, we will see not only the rise of a king, but also the fall of a dream. We will meet the wise and mysterious Merlin, whose magic guided Arthur but could not protect him from fate. We will follow the quests of the noble knights who set out in search of honor and glory, and we will witness the great tragedy that unfolds when the bonds of loyalty are broken. The legend of King Arthur endures not because it is a story of perfect heroes or flawless victories, but because it speaks to the complexities of human nature. It is a story of ideals, of striving for greatness in a world that is often imperfect. It is a reminder that even the noblest of dreams can be fragile, and that even the greatest of kings is only human. As you listen to this tale, let yourself be carried back to a time of magic and mystery, where knights in shining armor rode out on quests, where kings ruled with honor, and where the dream of Camelot lived on, even in the face of inevitable tragedy. The story of King Arthur is not just a story of one man, it is the story of a kingdom, of a dream, and of a legacy that has stood the test of time. Chapter 1. The Sword in the Stone. Long before King Arthur became the legendary ruler of Camelot, he was just a boy living in obscurity, unaware of the greatness that awaited him. The story of how he ascended to the throne begins with a prophecy, a sword, and a kingdom in chaos. At the time of Arthur's birth, Britain was a land divided. Rival lords and nobles, each seeking power for themselves, warred over the throne. The once great kingdom, which had been united under the rule of Uther Pendragon, Arthur's father, was now crumbling without a clear heir to guide it. Uther, the mighty king, had died without publicly acknowledging his son, leaving the throne empty and the land in disarray. The land had become a battleground, with different factions vying for control, and the people were suffering under the weight of this ongoing strife. Without a strong and legitimate ruler, Britain's unity had shattered. Lords who had once pledged their loyalty to the Pendragon bloodline now raised their banners against each other, hoping to carve out their own pieces of the kingdom. The peasantry, caught in the midst of this conflict, struggled to survive in a land where violence had become an everyday reality. But there was hope. Merlin, the wise and mysterious wizard who had been Uther's advisor, knew that the future of Britain rested on the shoulders of Uther's hidden son. Merlin had taken the newborn Arthur from his mother, Igraine, for his own protection, hiding him away in the household of a noble knight named Sir Ector. Raised as Sir Ector's own child, Arthur grew up alongside Ector's son, Kay, completely unaware of his royal lineage. Arthur's childhood was simple and humble. He spent his days in Sir Ector's household, learning the skills that any young squire would: how to care for horses, how to serve at a knight's table, and how to ready armor for battle. Arthur admired Kay, who trained to become a knight, and he dutifully served as his foster brother's squire. He had no reason to believe that his life would ever be more than this, nor did he desire more. He was content in his place, unaware of the destiny that loomed over him. While Arthur grew into a strong and kind-hearted young man, the kingdom's troubles deepened. Rival lords battled for power, and the people of Britain suffered. There was no unity, no peace, and no justice. It was a time of darkness, and the people longed for a king to restore order. But no one knew who the rightful king was. No one except Merlin. To reveal the true heir to the throne, Merlin devised a test, one that only the rightful king could pass. In the heart of London, on a stone pedestal, Merlin placed a magnificent sword, its hilt adorned with jewels and inscribed with ancient runes. This was no ordinary sword. This was Excalibur, a sword forged by magic and destined for the one true king. The sword was embedded deep within the stone, held fast by powerful enchantments. Upon the sword's hilt an inscription appeared. "Whosoever pulleth out this sword from this stone is the rightwise king born of all England." The challenge was simple. Only the true king could draw the sword from the stone. But this task was far from easy, for no ordinary man could break the magical spell that bound the sword. Only the one destined to rule could pull it free. The sword became an object of fascination. Knights and nobles from every corner of the realm flocked to London, eager to prove their worth. Each man who attempted to draw the sword came with his retinue, dressed in shining armor, filled with pride and ambition. They approached the stone with confidence, certain that they were destined to rule. But no matter how they pulled, strained, or prayed, the sword did not move. It remained fast in the stone, a silent guardian of the kingdom's true heir. The scene became almost ritualistic. Every morning a new challenger would step forward, their face set with determination. Crowds gathered to watch, hopeful that the next night would be the one to free the sword and restore peace to the land. But every night the sword remained in its stone, and the kingdom remained without a king. Years passed, and the sword in the stone became more than just a symbol of kingship. It became a symbol of hope, a glimmer of light in a kingdom torn apart by darkness. Meanwhile, Arthur, still unaware of his true heritage, continued to live a humble life as Sir Ector's ward. He was no knight. He was simply Kay's squire, tasked with attending to his foster brother's needs, carrying his armor, and fetching his sword before tournaments. It was during one such tournament, held in London, that Arthur's destiny was revealed. Sir Kay, eager to prove himself in the tournament, realized that he had forgotten his sword back at the inn. Frustrated and embarrassed, he ordered Arthur to retrieve it for him. Without hesitation, Arthur ran through the bustling streets of London, determined to find Kay's sword before the tournament began. The city was alive with the noise of knights preparing for battle, merchants hawking their wares, and the excitement of the crowd eager for the day's events. When Arthur arrived at the inn, he found the door locked, and no matter how hard he knocked, no one answered. Desperate to help his foster brother, Arthur remembered the sword in the stone, which stood nearby in the churchyard. Not knowing the significance of the sword, Arthur approached it, thinking only of fulfilling Kay's request. The great sword gleamed in the sunlight, its hilt beckoning him. Without a second thought, Arthur grasped the hilt with both hands and gave a gentle tug. To his surprise, the sword slid effortlessly from the stone, as if it had been waiting for him all along. Arthur, oblivious to the amazement of those who witnessed the event, carried the sword back to Kay, thinking nothing of the miraculous feat he had just performed. When Kay saw the sword in Arthur's hands, his eyes widened in shock. He immediately recognized it as the sword from the stone, the very sword that had defied all others. Word of Arthur's astonishing deed quickly spread, and Sir Ector, along with the other knights of the realm, gathered to witness the boy who had drawn Excalibur from its stone prison. Doubt filled their hearts. Could this humble squire truly be the rightful king? To be sure, Sir Ector asked Arthur to return the sword to the stone and attempt to draw it again in their presence. Without hesitation, Arthur placed the sword back into the stone. Then, with the eyes of the entire kingdom upon him, he stepped forward and pulled the sword free once more, as easily as if it were a twig from a tree. In that moment, the truth was clear to all. Arthur was the one true king, the rightful heir to the throne of Britain. Though Arthur had grown up believing himself to be of common birth, his destiny was now revealed. He was the son of Uther Pendragon, the king who had united Britain in the past, and he was the chosen one to unite the kingdom once again. With Merlin's guidance, Arthur took his place as king, and the legend of King Arthur was born. Chapter 2. The Formation of the Round Table. After Arthur's ascension to the throne, a new era began in Britain. Arthur, with the legendary sword Excalibur in hand and the wisdom of Merlin by his side, sought to bring unity and peace to the fractured kingdom. But Arthur knew that he could not accomplish this great task alone. To rule wisely, he would need the counsel and strength of noble knights, men of courage, honor, and loyalty, who would help him uphold the ideals of justice and protect the realm from the chaos that threatened it. Thus, Arthur's dream of creating a court of chivalry began to take shape, and at the heart of that dream was the Round Table. The Round Table, unlike any other symbol of power in medieval times, was more than just a meeting place. It was a symbol of equality, unity, and fairness. In a time when kings and nobles sat at long rectangular tables, with the king always at the head and others ranked in order of importance, Arthur envisioned something different. He wanted a table where no one would sit above another, where each knight would be equal in standing, regardless of rank or title. This, he believed, would foster unity among his knights and prevent the petty rivalries and jealousies that so often plagued other courts. Merlin, ever the wise adviser, saw the potential in Arthur's vision and helped bring it to life. It is said that Merlin used his magic to create the Great Round Table, a massive circular table made of the finest wood and adorned with intricate carvings. The table was large enough to seat the greatest knights of the realm, and no seat at the table was higher or more prominent than any other. Each knight who sat there was considered equal, bound by their oath of loyalty to the king and to the ideals of chivalry. With the Round Table in place, Arthur began to gather the finest knights in Britain. These men were not only skilled in battle, but also committed to the code of chivalry, a set of principles that emphasized honor, courage, compassion, and loyalty. They were to serve not only their king, but also the people of the realm, protecting the weak, upholding justice, and defending the innocent. Among the knights who joined Arthur's court, some names would become legendary, their deeds immortalized in the annals of history. There was Sir Lancelot, perhaps the most famous of Arthur's knights. Lancelot, known for his unmatched skill with the sword and his unwavering sense of duty, quickly became one of Arthur's closest confidants. His bravery on the battlefield was second to none, and his loyalty to Arthur was unquestioned, at least for a time. But even Lancelot, the greatest of knights, would eventually find himself torn between his duty to the king and his love for Queen Guinevere, a conflict that would lead to the eventual downfall of Camelot. Then there was Sir Gawain, a knight of noble heart and unshakable loyalty. Gawain was Arthur's nephew and one of the most respected knights at the Round Table. Known for his honor and courage, Gawain's strength was said to grow with the rising sun, reaching its peak at noon. His deeds, both on the battlefield and off, were the stuff of legend, and his commitment to the ideals of the Round Table never wavered. Sir Percival, one of the youngest knights to join Arthur's court, was known for his purity and innocence. Though he lacked the experience of the older knights, Percival's courage and faith earned him a place at the Round Table, and his role in the quest for the Holy Grail would cement his legacy as one of the greatest knights of Camelot. Sir Galahad, the son of Sir Lancelot, was another knight who joined the Round Table. Galahad was the embodiment of purity and righteousness, a man whose heart was said to be free from sin. His quest to find the Holy Grail would become one of the most famous tales of Arthurian legend, and his unyielding commitment to goodness and justice made him a beacon of light in a world often filled with darkness. These knights, along with many others, swore an oath to serve King Arthur and the ideals of the Round Table. Their loyalty to Arthur was not based on fear or obligation, but on a shared belief in a better world, a world where justice reigned, where the strong protected the weak, and where honor was more valuable than gold or power. The Knights of the Round Table were more than just warriors. They were the protectors of Arthur's dream, the guardians of Camelot's ideals. They rode out on quests to defend the helpless, to fight for justice, and to bring peace to a land still scarred by years of war and division. They upheld the code of chivalry, treating all people with respect and compassion, regardless of their station in life. But while the Round Table was a symbol of unity, it was not immune to the conflicts and challenges that would arise within its ranks. The knights, though bound by their oaths, were still human and human frailties. Pride, jealousy, and love would soon begin to test the strength of their bonds. Arthur, ever the wise and just king, sought to lead his knights by example. His vision for Camelot was one of peace and prosperity, where the ideals of chivalry and justice could flourish. But even he could not foresee the trials that lay ahead, trials that would threaten to tear apart the very fabric of the brotherhood he had worked so hard to build. For now, however, the formation of the Round Table marked the beginning of a golden age for Camelot. Arthur's court was strong, his knights were loyal, and the kingdom began to heal from the wounds of the past. Together, they faced their challenges with bravery and determination, believing in the dream that Arthur had laid before them. Chapter 3. Merlin the Wizard and Arthur's Guidance. No legend of King Arthur would be complete without the presence of the enigmatic and wise wizard Merlin. While King Arthur was the heart of Camelot, leading his people with honor and courage, Merlin was the mind behind the scenes, guiding Arthur through the complexities of kingship and the trials that lay ahead. Merlin, with his ancient knowledge and magical powers, was far more than just an advisor. He was a protector, a teacher, and a friend to the young king, and his influence shaped the destiny of both Arthur and the kingdom of Camelot. Merlin's origins are as mysterious as the man himself. Some say that Merlin was born of human and otherworldly parentage, his mother a mortal woman, and his father a spirit from the otherworld. This mix of human and magical blood gave Merlin extraordinary abilities, far beyond those of any ordinary sorcerer. He possessed the gift of prophecy, the ability to see into the future and the past, and he was a master of all forms of magic. His wisdom was unmatched, for he had lived many lifetimes, and his knowledge of the world stretched across centuries. But Merlin's role in Arthur's life began even before Arthur was born. It was Merlin who orchestrated the union of Uther Pendragon and Igraine, Arthur's parents, ensuring that Arthur would be born and that the prophecy of the great king would come to pass. Merlin, ever watchful, took the infant Arthur into his care, ensuring that the boy would grow up safely, far from the dangers of court intrigue. Merlin's hand shaped Arthur's destiny from the very beginning, and it was Merlin who ensured that Arthur would one day draw the sword Excalibur from the stone and claim his rightful place as king. When Arthur ascended to the throne, Merlin became his trusted advisor. Arthur, though noble and brave, was still a young king, inexperienced in the art of ruling. He had the strength to lead men into battle, but the complexities of governance, diplomacy, and leadership required wisdom that could not be gained from a sword alone. It was in these moments that Merlin's guidance became invaluable. He offered Arthur counsel on everything from matters of state to personal decisions, always guiding the young king toward the path of justice and righteousness. Merlin's magic was not always flashy or obvious, but his influence was felt in every corner of the kingdom. He would often appear at Arthur's side when least expected, offering cryptic advice that, though confusing at first, would later prove to be the key to solving a great dilemma. Merlin's words were often wrapped in riddles and metaphors, forcing Arthur to think deeply about the challenges he faced. Through Merlin, Arthur learned that true wisdom came not from power alone, but from understanding the delicate balance of the world, between strength and compassion, between duty and love, and between honor and sacrifice. One of Merlin's most famous interventions was his role in helping Arthur obtain Excalibur, the sword that would become the symbol of Arthur's kingship. While Arthur had initially pulled a sword from the stone to claim the throne, that sword was not Excalibur. The magical sword that would define Arthur's reign was given to him by the Lady of the Lake, a mystical figure who resided in a hidden lake deep in the forests of Britain. It was Merlin who guided Arthur to the Lady of the Lake, leading him through enchanted woods and across misty waters to the place where Excalibur lay hidden. The lady, a being of great power, emerged from the waters, offering the sword to Arthur as a gift. Excalibur was no ordinary weapon. It was imbued with ancient magic, its blade capable of cutting through any armor, its hilt gleaming with mystical runes. But perhaps its most important power lay in its scabbard, for as long as Arthur wore it, no wound could harm him. With Excalibur in hand, Arthur became not only a symbol of strength, but also a king blessed by magic itself. Merlin's relationship with Arthur, however, was not without its difficulties. While Merlin saw the potential for greatness in Arthur, he also saw the king's flaws. Arthur was a man of immense courage and honor, but like all humans, he was fallible. He loved too deeply, sometimes to his detriment, and he trusted too freely, which would eventually lead to his undoing. Merlin, knowing what the future held, often tried to steer Arthur away from these pitfalls, but even the greatest wizard could not change the course of fate. One of the most tragic aspects of Merlin's story was his own fate. Though Merlin possessed great power and wisdom, he was not immune to the forces of love and temptation. As Arthur's reign continued, Merlin found himself drawn to a young woman named Nimue, sometimes called Vivian, a woman who, though beautiful and enchanting, had her own ambitions. She sought to learn Merlin's magical secrets, and over time she gained his trust. Merlin, captivated by her charm, began to teach her the arts of magic, unaware that she had plans of her own. Nimue, having learned enough from Merlin, eventually betrayed him. Using the very spells he had taught her, she entrapped him within a magical cave or a great tree, depending on the telling, sealing him away for eternity. Though Merlin's fate was tragic, it marked the end of his direct involvement in Arthur's life. Without Merlin's wisdom, Arthur would face the trials to come without the guidance that had once steered him through danger. Yet, even in his absence, Merlin's influence lingered. The lessons he had imparted to Arthur, the wisdom he had shared, and the magic he had woven into the very fabric of Camelot continued to shape the destiny of the kingdom. Arthur had become the king that Merlin had always known he could be, but the greatest challenges lay ahead. Challenges that would test Arthur's strength, his loyalty, and his heart. Merlin's legacy was not one of power, but of wisdom. He had taught Arthur that a true king was not measured by the strength of his sword, but by the strength of his character. It was this lesson that would carry Arthur through the trials of love, betrayal, and loss that were yet to come. Though Merlin was gone, his spirit remained a guiding force, a reminder that even the greatest of kings needed the counsel of wisdom to navigate the treacherous paths of leadership. Love triangle, Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. At the heart of Camelot's story lies a love triangle, one that would sow the seeds of the kingdom's downfall. The legendary romance between Queen Guinevere and Sir Lancelot, King Arthur's most trusted knight, is one of the most enduring and tragic elements of the Arthurian legend. It is a tale of love, loyalty, and betrayal, a story that reveals the complexities of human emotion and the fragile nature of even the strongest bonds. Arthur's love for Guinevere was pure and deep. When Arthur became king, he sought to marry someone who could be not only his queen but also his equal in grace and beauty. Guinevere, the daughter of King Leodegrance, was renowned throughout the land for her beauty and charm. Arthur, captivated by her, asked for her hand in marriage, and Leodegrance, who had long been loyal to Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, agreed. Their wedding was a grand affair, symbolizing the unity and strength of the newly formed kingdom of Camelot. Guinevere became Arthur's queen, standing by his side as they worked to build a kingdom founded on justice and honor. Their marriage was seen as the embodiment of the ideals that Camelot represented: nobility, unity, and love. But even in a kingdom as noble as Camelot, the human heart is a complex and unpredictable force. While Arthur loved Guinevere with all his heart, his duties as king often took him away from the court, leading him into battles and diplomatic negotiations that kept him apart from his queen. It was during these times that Sir Lancelot, Arthur's most loyal and valiant knight, grew closer to Guinevere. Lancelot had been a key figure in Arthur's court from the very beginning. He was known not only for his unmatched skill in combat, but also for his chivalry and unwavering devotion to the king. Arthur trusted Lancelot above all others, and Lancelot, in return, had sworn to protect the king and the kingdom with his life. But as time passed, Lancelot's loyalty to Arthur became complicated by his growing feelings for Guinevere. Guinevere, too, found herself drawn to Lancelot. While she loved Arthur as her king and husband, Lancelot's charm, bravery, and dedication stirred something deeper within her. The two shared a connection that went beyond mere friendship, and before long, their affection for one another blossomed into a forbidden love. At first, Lancelot and Guinevere struggled to resist their feelings. They knew the consequences of betraying Arthur, both as their king and as someone they both deeply respected. But love, once awakened, is a force that cannot easily be contained. Despite their best efforts, Lancelot and Guinevere's love grew stronger, and they eventually gave in to their passion, beginning a secret affair that would remain hidden from the king. For a time, the love triangle remained concealed, and life in Camelot continued as usual. Arthur, unaware of the relationship between his queen and his closest knight, continued to rule with wisdom and fairness, relying on both Guinevere and Lancelot to support him. The love they all shared, for Arthur, for Camelot, and for each other, created a delicate balance, one that could not last forever. But secrets, no matter how well guarded, have a way of revealing themselves. The first cracks in the foundation of Camelot began to appear as rumors of the affair spread throughout the court. The whispers grew louder, and soon those who were jealous of Lancelot's favor with the king began to plot against him. They saw in the affair an opportunity to undermine both Lancelot and Arthur, to weaken the Round Table, and to sow discord among the knights. Among those who sought to bring about Lancelot's downfall was Sir Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son, who harbored ambitions of his own. Mordred, a knight with his own designs on the throne, saw in the growing scandal an opportunity to fracture Camelot's unity and seize power for himself. It wasn't long before Arthur, too, began to sense that something was amiss. Though Lancelot and Guinevere had tried to hide their affair, the tension in the court grew impossible to ignore. Arthur, torn between his love for his queen and his trust in his knight, refused to believe the rumors at first. But, as the evidence mounted, Arthur could no longer turn a blind eye to the truth. When the affair was finally exposed, the betrayal cut Arthur to the core. He had loved Guinevere with all his heart, and he had trusted Lancelot above all others. The revelation of their betrayal left Arthur not only heartbroken, but also torn between his duties as a king and his emotions as a man. The very foundation of Camelot, the bonds of loyalty and trust, had been shattered. The consequences were swift and severe. Lancelot, though still loyal to Arthur, was forced to flee Camelot, his reputation in ruins. Guinevere, too, faced punishment for her part in the affair. In some versions of the legend, Arthur sentenced her to be executed for her betrayal, though Lancelot intervened and rescued her, further deepening the rift between the former friends. The affair between Lancelot and Guinevere did more than just break Arthur's heart. It fractured the unity of the Round Table. The knights, once bound by loyalty to their king and to each other, began to splinter. Some sided with Arthur, others with Lancelot, and still others sought only to further their own ambitions in the midst of the chaos. What had once been the strongest court in the land now stood on the brink of collapse, its ideals of chivalry and honor eroded by jealousy, betrayal, and ambition. The love triangle between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere was more than just a personal tragedy. It was the beginning of the end for Camelot. The affair had exposed the vulnerability of even the noblest of kingdoms, showing that no matter how strong the ideals of honor and loyalty, they could be undone by the complexities of the human heart. Chapter 5. The Quest for the Holy Grail. The legend of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is filled with many quests, but none is more sacred, mysterious, or awe-inspiring than the quest for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, often depicted as a cup or chalice, was believed to be the very vessel that Christ used at the Last Supper, and, according to legend, it possessed miraculous powers, offering eternal life, healing the wounded, and granting divine wisdom to those who found it. But the Grail was not just an ordinary relic. It was a symbol of spiritual purity and divine favor, attainable only by the most virtuous. The quest for the Holy Grail was more than just a search for a relic. It was a test of the knights' souls, a journey that would reveal the depths of their faith, honor, and courage. For many, it became the ultimate trial of chivalry, an opportunity to prove themselves worthy not only as knights, but also as servants of a higher calling. The quest began when Merlin, or in some versions, a mysterious figure known as the Fisher King, revealed that the Holy Grail had been hidden away, guarded by mystical forces that protected it from those unworthy of its power. The Grail could only be found by a knight who was pure of heart, one whose soul was free from sin and whose motives were untainted by personal gain. For the Knights of the Round Table, this challenge was irresistible, and many set out on the perilous journey, hoping to be the one to find the Grail and bring its blessings to Camelot. One of the most prominent knights to embark on this quest was Sir Galahad, the son of Sir Lancelot. From the moment of his birth, Galahad was destined for greatness. Unlike his father, whose affair with Queen Guinevere had brought dishonor to the Round Table, Galahad was a paragon of virtue. His heart was pure, his faith unwavering, and his courage unmatched. He was in many ways the perfect knight, untainted by the sins and betrayals that had begun to fracture Camelot. Galahad's quest for the Holy Grail was one of spiritual awakening as much as it was an adventure. Guided by divine visions and signs, Galahad ventured into lands unknown, facing dangers both physical and supernatural. Along the way, he encountered tests of his faith, challenges to his purity, and temptations designed to lead him astray. But Galahad, with his unshakable commitment to righteousness, overcame each obstacle, moving ever closer to the Grail. The legend tells us that during his journey, Galahad was accompanied by two other knights, Sir Percival and Sir Bors. Together, the three knights formed a brotherhood within the larger brotherhood of the Round Table, bound by their shared mission and their dedication to the ideals of chivalry. Each knight faced his own challenges, for the quest was as much about their inner journeys as it was about their physical trials. Sir Percival, though younger and less experienced than the others, was known for his innocence and his purity of heart. Like Galahad, Percival was driven by a desire to prove himself worthy of the Grail, and his trials on the quest tested his resolve and his understanding of what it meant to be a true knight. Percival's journey was one of self-discovery, as he learned to overcome his doubts and trust in the greater power that guided him. Sir Bors, on the other hand, was a more seasoned knight, and his quest for the Grail was a test of his loyalty. Bors had always been known for his dedication to Arthur and the Round Table, but the quest forced him to confront difficult choices between his loyalty to his comrades and his duty to a higher calling. At one point during the journey, Bors was faced with an impossible dilemma: save the life of his brother or remain true to his quest. His decision, though painful, ultimately revealed his commitment to the ideals of selflessness and sacrifice. As the three knights ventured deeper into the unknown, they found themselves nearing the end of their journey. They had faced countless trials, battles against evil knights, confrontations with dark sorcery, and even temptations designed to lead them away from their path. But through it all, Galahad's unwavering faith led them forward, and soon they stood at the threshold of the Grail's resting place. It is said that the Grail was hidden in a mystical castle, guarded by the Fisher King, who had been cursed with a terrible wound that could only be healed by the Grail's power. The castle itself was a place of great beauty, but also of great sorrow, for the king's wound had brought a blight upon the land, and only the purest knight could lift the curse. When Galahad approached the Grail, he was overcome by a divine vision. He saw the heavens open before him, and a brilliant light surrounded the sacred vessel. In that moment, Galahad understood that the Grail was more than just a physical object. It was a symbol of the divine, a connection to the eternal and the sacred. His heart filled with joy and peace, Galahad reached out and touched the Grail, and in doing so, he was lifted to the heavens, his soul ascending to join the angels. Sir Percival and Sir Bors, though unable to touch the Grail themselves, witnessed Galahad's ascension and understood that the quest had been fulfilled. Galahad's purity had earned him the ultimate reward, eternal life in the presence of the divine. For Percival and Bors, the quest ended not with the finding of the Grail, but with the understanding that true greatness lies not in the objects we seek, but in the purity of our hearts and the nobility of our actions. The Holy Grail was never brought back to Camelot. Its power remained hidden, a mystery that could only be glimpsed by those worthy of its blessings. But the legacy of the quest lived on, a reminder of the ideals that the knights of the Round Table had sworn to uphold. Though many knights had embarked on the quest, only Galahad had been pure enough to achieve it, and his story became a beacon of hope and inspiration for future generations. Yet, while the Grail brought salvation to some, it also symbolized the beginning of the end for Camelot. The quest had taken many of Arthur's greatest knights away from the court, and with their absence, the unity of the Round Table began to crumble. The affair between Lancelot and Guinevere had already sown discord, and the quest for the Grail, while noble, further weakened the bonds that held the kingdom together. As the knights returned from their quests, some successful, others broken, Camelot found itself on the brink of collapse, its golden age slipping away. Chapter 6. Mordred's Betrayal and the Fall of Camelot. The golden age of Camelot, which had once shone so brightly, was nearing its end. The seeds of betrayal, sown long before, were beginning to bear fruit, and at the heart of the kingdom's downfall was a figure whose very existence was tied to betrayal: Mordred, the illegitimate son of King Arthur. Mordred's treachery would bring about the collapse of Camelot, leading to the final and fateful battle between father and son, where the dreams of Arthur and the Round Table would be shattered. Mordred's story begins with a secret that haunted Arthur's past. In his youth, Arthur had fathered a child with his half-sister, Morgause, the wife of King Lot of Orkney. Morgause, also known in some tales as Morgan Le Fay, was a sorceress with her own ambitions, and her relationship with Arthur was a complex and dangerous one. The result of this union was Mordred, a child born not out of love, but out of deception and confusion. Mordred was raised away from Camelot, but his destiny would one day lead him back to his father's court, where he would play a key role in the kingdom's undoing. As Mordred grew older, he learned of his true parentage and harbored resentment toward Arthur. While Arthur had risen to greatness, uniting the land and creating a kingdom founded on justice and chivalry, Mordred had grown up feeling abandoned and overlooked. The bitterness and anger that festered within him were stoked by those who sought to exploit his hatred for their own gain. Chief among them was Morgan Le Fay, who, in many versions of the legend, despised Arthur and sought to bring about his downfall. She whispered in Mordred's ear, filling his heart with a desire for revenge. Despite the tension between father and son, Mordred was eventually brought to Arthur's court, where he was made a knight of the Round Table. Arthur, perhaps unaware of the darkness in Mordred's heart, trusted him with responsibilities and treated him as a member of the royal family. But beneath the surface, Mordred's loyalty was a facade, masking his true intentions. By this time, the unity of Camelot had already begun to unravel. The affair between Guinevere and Lancelot had deeply fractured the trust among the knights of the Round Table, and many of Arthur's most loyal companions had either left on quests, been banished, or fallen in battle. The once strong brotherhood that had upheld the ideals of chivalry was now weakened, and into this fragile environment stepped Mordred, who saw an opportunity to seize power for himself. Mordred's chance came when Arthur, in his capacity as king, was called away to fight a battle in a distant land. As was custom, Arthur appointed Mordred as regent in his absence, trusting him to rule the kingdom in his stead until his return. It was a decision that would prove disastrous. No sooner had Arthur left Camelot than Mordred began his plans to usurp the throne. He declared himself king, spreading false rumors that Arthur had been killed in battle and that the crown rightfully belonged to him. Mordred's betrayal was swift and decisive. He gathered support from those who were disillusioned with Arthur's reign and those who sought power for themselves. Many of the remaining knights of the Round Table, already divided by the scandal of Lancelot and Guinevere, were unable to stop Mordred's coup. With the kingdom weakened, Mordred's forces took control of Camelot, and the dream of Arthur's utopia began to crumble. When news of Mordred's treachery reached Arthur, he was devastated. The betrayal of his son, coupled with the betrayal of his wife and his closest knight, weighed heavily on his heart. But despite his sorrow, Arthur knew that he had to act. He gathered what remained of his loyal knights and rode back to Camelot, determined to reclaim his throne and restore order to the kingdom. The final confrontation between Arthur and Mordred took place on the battlefield of Camlan, a place that would forever be remembered as the site of Camelot's downfall. Both father and son knew that the battle would be the end, one way or another. Arthur, though older now and weary from years of ruling, still possessed the strength and courage that had made him a legendary king. Mordred, fueled by hatred and ambition, was determined to take what he believed was rightfully his. The battle was fierce and bloody, with knights clashing in the mud and chaos of war. Arthur, wielding Excalibur, fought with the strength of a man who knew that everything he had built, everything he had believed in, was at stake. He cut through Mordred's forces with a fury that spoke of both sorrow and rage, his heart heavy with the knowledge that his own son had brought this upon him. At the height of the battle, Arthur and Mordred met face to face. The air around them seemed to still, as if the very forces of fate had paused to witness the tragic confrontation between father and son. Arthur, knowing that he must end the conflict, struck Mordred with a fatal blow from Excalibur. But in his dying breath, Mordred, with all the hatred and fury left in his body, struck Arthur with his spear, delivering a wound that would prove mortal. As Mordred fell, the battle came to an end, but the cost was immeasurable. Arthur, gravely wounded, was carried from the battlefield by his remaining knights. The once great king, who had united Britain and built a kingdom of honor and justice, now lay dying. The dream of Camelot shattered by betrayal and bloodshed. In his final moments, Arthur was taken to the edge of the lake where the Lady of the Lake had given him Excalibur. It is said that as Arthur lay dying, he ordered one of his knights, Sir Bedivere, to return the sword to the lake, so that it might be reclaimed by the mystical forces that had granted it to him. Bedivere, reluctant to part with such a powerful relic, hesitated at first, but upon Arthur's insistence he eventually cast Excalibur into the waters. As the sword sank beneath the surface, the Lady of the Lake appeared once more, catching the sword in her hand and drawing it back into the depths. Arthur, now at peace, was carried away to Avalon, a mystical island where it was said he would be healed of his wounds. The legend tells that Arthur did not die that day, but rather that he would return when Britain needed him most. His body, placed on a boat and guided by enchanted hands, sailed into the mists of Avalon, leaving behind a kingdom that would never see his like again. The fall of Camelot was not just the end of a kingdom, it was the end of an ideal. The Round Table, once a symbol of unity, had been broken by betrayal and ambition. The knights, once bound by loyalty and chivalry, had been scattered, their brotherhood torn apart. And Arthur, the greatest king Britain had ever known, had been brought low, not by an external enemy, but by the forces of betrayal and treachery from within. Yet, even in its fall, the legend of Camelot endured. The story of Arthur, of the Round Table, and of the knights who fought for honor and justice lived on, passed down through the ages as a symbol of what could be. Though Camelot had fallen, the dream it represented, of a just and noble kingdom, remained in the hearts and minds of all who heard its tale. Chapter 7. The Death of King Arthur and Avalon. The final chapter of King Arthur's life is shrouded in mystery, tragedy, and a sense of hope that transcends death. After the devastating betrayal of Mordred and the bloody battle at Camelot, Arthur's once mighty kingdom lay in ruins. The Round Table had been broken, many of his knights had fallen, and the dream of Camelot, a kingdom of honor, justice, and unity, had been shattered. But Arthur's story was far from over. Though his body was broken, his legend would endure. As Arthur lay on the battlefield, gravely wounded by Mordred's spear, his remaining knights gathered around him, filled with sorrow and helplessness. Among them was Sir Bedivere, one of Arthur's most loyal knights, who had fought valiantly at his side and had survived the terrible battle. Bedivere, heartbroken by the sight of his dying king, stayed close, awaiting Arthur's final commands. The air was heavy with grief, the silence only broken by the distant cries of the wounded and the whispers of the fallen. Arthur, weak and knowing that his time was short, called Bedivere to his side. In his final moments, Arthur instructed Bedivere to return the sword Excalibur to the lake from whence it came. Excalibur, the symbol of Arthur's kingship and the source of his strength, had to be returned to its mystical origins. At first, Bedivere could not bring himself to carry out Arthur's request. The sword was a powerful relic, and he hesitated, thinking that it should be preserved as a symbol of Arthur's reign. Twice Bedivere went to the lake but could not throw the sword into the water. He returned to Arthur, claiming he had done as asked, but Arthur, sensing the truth, commanded him to fulfill the task without delay. On his third attempt, Bedivere finally cast Excalibur into the lake. As the sword spun through the air and touched the water's surface, a hand, pale and shimmering, rose from the depths to catch it. It was the hand of the Lady of the Lake, the mystical figure who had given the sword to Arthur long ago. She lifted Excalibur high, and then, as gracefully as she had appeared, the hand and sword vanished beneath the water, returning to the enchanted realm from which they had come. With the sword returned, Arthur knew that his time on earth was at an end, But even in these final moments, there was no sense of despair, only a quiet acceptance. Arthur had fought valiantly, ruled justly, and upheld the ideals of chivalry and honor to the best of his ability. Though Camelot had fallen, and though betrayal had torn apart the kingdom he had worked so hard to build, Arthur's legacy would live on. It was then that Arthur's body was carried to the edge of a mystical lake, where a boat awaited him. This was no ordinary boat. It was a vessel from Avalon, the fabled island of healing and magic, where the greatest kings and heroes were said to find rest. The boat, shrouded in mist and guided by ethereal hands, was there to carry Arthur away from the mortal world and into the arms of Avalon, where he would be healed of his mortal wounds. As Arthur was laid upon the boat, he was surrounded by figures of great beauty and mystery, maidens who silently guided the vessel toward the misty shores of Avalon. These women, often seen as the queens or priestesses of Avalon, were said to possess the power to heal and to bestow eternal peace upon those who entered their realm. It was believed that once Arthur reached Avalon, he would be healed of his wounds and would live on in peace, waiting for the day when Britain would need him once again. The image of Arthur sailing into the mists of Avalon has become one of the most powerful symbols in all of mythology. Unlike other kings and heroes, Arthur's story does not end with his death. Instead, his departure to Avalon suggests that he will one day return. The once and future king, as he came to be known, would rise again in Britain's hour of greatest need, bringing with him the hope of a new Camelot, where justice and honor would once again reign supreme. As Arthur's boat drifted away from the shore, the mists of Avalon closed around it, and he was lost from sight. His knights, who had remained behind, watched in silence, knowing that their king was now beyond their reach, but not beyond their hearts. Sir Bedivere, who had returned Excalibur to the lake, stood at the shore, watching the horizon until the boat was gone, and the air was still. He knew that this was the end of an era, but also that Arthur's spirit would live on. For centuries after, the legend of King Arthur and Avalon would grow. Many believed that Arthur did not die that day at Camelot, but rather that he slept in the enchanted lands of Avalon, waiting for the time when Britain would once again call him forth. The hope of his return, of a time when the ideals of Camelot would rise again, gave comfort to those who cherished the values of chivalry, honor, and justice. Avalon itself, a land of mystery and magic, became a symbol of hope and healing. It was a place where time moved differently, where the wounds of the body and the soul could be mended, and where the greatest of kings could find peace. Whether Avalon was a real place or a mythical realm, its presence in the Arthurian legend serves as a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of renewal and redemption. As the story of Arthur passed from generation to generation, his memory remained a beacon of hope. Though Camelot had fallen, and though the knights of the Round Table had been scattered, the dream of a just and noble kingdom did not die. It lived on in the hearts of those who believed in the power of chivalry and honor. And it is said that one day, when the world is ready, Arthur will return from Avalon, bringing with him the light of a new dawn. The story of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, and the rise and fall of Camelot is a tale that has endured for centuries, capturing the imagination of countless generations. It is a legend filled with bravery, loyalty, love, and betrayal, but also one that carries a deep sense of hope. Even in the face of betrayal, loss, and the collapse of a kingdom, the ideals of chivalry, honor, and justice that Arthur fought for continue to inspire. Arthur's legacy lives on, not only in the legends of Britain but also in the hearts of all who believe in the possibility of a better world, one where courage, compassion, and fairness guide our actions. The dream of Camelot, though it may have fallen, remains a symbol of what humanity can achieve when we come together in the pursuit of a noble cause. The Round Table, with its vision of equality and unity, reminds us that true leadership is not about power, but about service, respect, and the strength of community. Even as Arthur sailed into the mists of Avalon, his story was not one of an ending, but of a promise that he would return when the world needed him most. The once and future king, as he came to be known, would rise again to lead the people toward a brighter and more just future. His legend has endured for a reason. It speaks to the timeless human desire for fairness, for a world where good triumphs over evil, and where integrity stands firm in the face of adversity. As you reflect on the tale of King Arthur, remember that the greatest heroes are not those who never falter, but those who continue to strive for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Arthur, his knights, and the dream of Camelot represent the best of humanity. The courage to fight for justice, the wisdom to lead with kindness, and the hope that no matter how dark the path, there is always the possibility of renewal and redemption. As you drift off to sleep, let the peaceful image of Camelot, with its shining towers and noble ideals, fill your mind. Imagine the tranquility of Avalon, where King Arthur rests, waiting for the time when he will return to lead his people once again. In this moment of rest, take comfort in the knowledge that, like the legends of old, your own story is filled with potential for growth, peace, and renewal. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the light of honor, courage, and the enduring spirit of King Arthur's Camelot.